Linda Bennett moved through the quiet house with quick steps, her breath unsteady as she called out, "Son, hurry up, Dad will be back soon and will find us." And her voice trembled in the air like a thin piece of paper in the wind. The Bennett house in Seattle always felt warm and familiar, but that afternoon it felt different. It felt tight, filled with nervous energy, almost like the walls were listening. Ethan Bennett, her 24-year-old son, rushed down the hallway holding a cardboard box in one hand and tangled string lights in the other. His brown hair bounced with every step, and even though he was no child, the urgency in his mother's tone made him move faster. He understood exactly why she was anxious, because this surprise had taken weeks to plan. And if Mark Bennett came home too early, everything they worked for would collapse in a second. They wanted to create something gentle and emotional, something that might heal the quiet cracks in the family. And even though Ethan was not supposed to feel responsible for fixing the marriage between his parents, he still tried to support his mother because he could see how much she carried in silence. The living room smelled like cinnamon candles and freshly opened photo albums, and the floor was scattered with old pictures showing family road trips, birthdays, and years that felt warmer than the present. Linda kept glancing at the clock on the wall, and every tick felt like a countdown she was losing control of. She wished her heart wasn't beating so fast. She wished she didn't have to worry whether her husband would appreciate all the effort. And she wished the love they once had still felt bright instead of dimmed by years of misunderstandings and silence. Ethan placed the box on the floor and opened it quickly, revealing handmade notes he had helped his mom write late at night. Notes filled with small memories and kind words that his parents had forgotten to say out loud. "Mom, we're almost done." "It's fine," he told her gently, but she only managed a small smile before turning toward the window again. The sunlight outside was fading into a soft afternoon glow, a reminder that time was moving fast, too fast for her comfort. She thought about the early years of her marriage when she and Mark would take road trips from Washington to Oregon just to watch the ocean swell against the rocks. She remembered the way he used to take her hand without thinking, as if the touch came naturally. Now, she barely remembered the last time he had done that. Life had changed, responsibilities piled up, and somewhere in the busy years they had stopped looking at each other the way they once had. Ethan noticed her faraway look but said nothing. He understood enough without asking. He felt protective of her, not in an unhealthy way, but in a way any grown child feels when they see a parent trying their hardest to hold a family together. "Mom, can you hand me that tape?" he asked, but she didn't hear him at first because she was lost in thoughts she rarely shared. When she finally snapped back, she hurried to help him, her hands shaking a little as she passed him the roll. The lights were almost ready, the photos were arranged on the wall in a heart shape, and the handwritten notes were placed neatly on the table. It was simple but meaningful, something that could remind Mark that his family still loved him even if things felt strained. The house grew quieter as they finished the setup, and for a moment Linda allowed herself to hope. She hoped Mark would walk in and smile the way he used to. She hoped he would understand the message behind this surprise. She hoped it would open a new chapter for them, but hope often came mixed with fear, and she could feel that fear tighten inside her chest. Ethan stepped back to admire the work. "Mom, it looks really good," he said, and he meant it. The room looked warm, glowing with tiny lights that created a gentle shine over their family memories. Linda nodded slowly, trying to calm herself, but deep down she worried that maybe she had waited too long to try. Outside, the neighborhood was calm, filled with the distant sound of kids biking and a dog barking 2 houses away. Then suddenly, a car door slammed outside, and the sharp sound cut through the peaceful moment like a knife. Linda froze. Ethan stopped mid-step. Their eyes met in a flash of fear and uncertainty. "Was that him?" Ethan whispered, feeling his stomach drop. Linda didn't answer right away because she wasn't sure. She moved toward the window slowly, her hands tightening around each other. Ethan followed her, but before either of them could look outside, there was a firm knock on the front door. The knock echoed through the hallway, bouncing against the walls and raising the tension instantly. Linda felt her legs weaken for a moment, not because she feared Mark, but because she feared the timing. She feared this moment falling apart at the last second. Ethan took a small step forward, carefully peeking through the thin curtain that hung over the window. His shoulders relaxed and he let out a slow breath. "It's Mrs. Parker from next door," he whispered. "Not Dad." Linda's entire body sagged with relief. She pressed a hand over her heart, letting the air return to her lungs. She loved her neighbor, but not right now, not when the wrong timing could ruin the importance of the surprise. "Ignore it," Ethan said softly. "She'll leave in a minute." They waited in silence as the knocking stopped. followed by footsteps fading away from the porch. Ethan returned to the decorations, trying to place one last picture on the wall, but he noticed his mother staring at the lights with a strange mixture of worry and sadness in her eyes. "Mom," he asked gently, "are you okay?" She blinked as if waking from a dream and nodded. "I'm fine, sweetheart, just thinking." But she was thinking more deeply than she admitted. She wondered if this surprise would really make a difference. She wondered if Mark still saw how hard she tried. She wondered if he still loved her the way he used to. And the questions tugged at her heart with a quiet pain she tried to hide. Ethan saw a lot without needing explanations. He had grown up watching the silent struggles, the long pauses at dinner, the tired smiles that tried to cover emotional exhaust. But he still believed in his parents, even if the belief came with a cautious kind of hope. He walked toward her and handed her a photo she had dropped earlier. "Don't worry so much," he said softly. "He'll appreciate this." Linda hoped he was right. She wanted to hold on to that hope, even if it was fragile. The house stood still for a moment, filled with memories and soft golden lights. Then another sound rose from the street, louder this time, more recognizable, more real. The quiet hum of Mark Bennett's car turning into the driveway. Ethan stiffened. Linda's breath caught. The moment was no longer coming, it was here. The front door handle turned, and the world they knew was about to shift, ready or not. The moment the door knock faded and Mrs. Parker's footsteps disappeared from the porch, the tension in the Bennett house softened just a little, but only for a breath, because Linda and Ethan both knew the real moment was still coming, and it was coming fast. The living room glowed with warm lights, soft and hopeful, but Linda's mind kept racing, filled with memories of everything that had gone both right and wrong over the last many years. She stood near the table where the handwritten notes were arranged, each note a small reminder of the life she once believed would last forever, and she wondered if she was foolish to think that something as simple as a surprise could fix all the cracks that had formed over time. Ethan moved beside her, sensing the weight she carried even though she never said much about it. He was 24, old enough to understand the quiet language of his parents' marriage, the long silences, the tired smiles, the way his dad came home later than before, and the way his mom stood by the window at night, staring out as if she was waiting for a different version of her life to return. "Mom," Ethan said softly as he taped the last picture to the wall, "you're doing everything you can. Dad will see that." She gave him a small nod, but her eyes held worry that no reassuring words could fully erase, because deep in her heart, she wondered if Mark had already drifted too far, if the man who once held her hand so easily had become someone she no longer knew how to reach. They had met young, full of dreams, ready to build a life in Seattle. And for a long time everything felt like it was falling into place. They bought a small home, raised Ethan, worked hard and built a life together. But somewhere along the way the closeness faded, replaced by routines and responsibilities that created distance instead of connection. She didn't blame Mark completely, she didn't blame herself either. Life simply got heavy and they stopped talking about the things that mattered. Ethan stepped back to look at the wall of memories, the lights reflecting in his calm brown eyes. "This looks perfect," he said with a gentle smile that reminded Linda of the boy he used to be. The boy who always tried to fix things even when it was not his job. She felt a wave of gratitude for him, for how he had helped without hesitation, for how he understood her feelings even when she tried to hide them. She walked to the window, touching the edge of the curtain as she listened to the distant hum of cars on the street, hoping none of them belonged to Mark yet, hoping she could have a few more minutes to breathe. Ethan approached her quietly, standing beside her as they watched the golden afternoon light fall over the neighborhood. "Mom, can I be honest?" he asked, and she nodded slowly. "I think Dad still cares, he just doesn't know how to show it right now." Linda swallowed gently, her throat tight. "I hope you're right," she whispered. "I just want our home to feel like a home again." She didn't tell him everything she felt. She didn't say how lonely she had been. She didn't say how she longed for even one moment where Mark looked at her with the warmth he once had. She didn't say how afraid she was that maybe love wasn't enough anymore. Ethan took a deep breath and lifted another small note, placing it near the photo of his parents holding him on his first day of school. "This one will remind him of how proud he used to be," he said, and Linda's chest tightened with emotion. The quiet sound of the tape pressing against the wall echoed through the room like a soft heartbeat, reminding them both that they still had time, still had hope, even if it was fragile. Linda turned away from the window and walked to the center of the room, adjusting one of the lights that had begun to slide off the mantel. Her fingers shook slightly, not from fear of failure, but from the storm of feelings she had been keeping inside for years. She remembered the early mornings when she would sit alone at the kitchen table, drinking coffee while Mark rushed out the door without looking back. She remembered the nights when she stayed up waiting for him, pretending she wasn't disappointed when he came home too tired to talk. She remembered the way they used to dance in the kitchen on quiet Saturday mornings, laughing about nothing, feeling like the world belonged to them, and she wondered, would this surprise remind him of those days? Or would it only remind him of how far apart they had drifted? Ethan saw the shadow cross her face. "Mom, don't think too much right now," he said softly. "Let's just finish this before he gets home." She nodded again, taking a deep breath as she moved to help him. Together they worked faster, setting the last few decorations, fixing the lighting, and making sure every memory was placed where it belonged. When they finished, Ethan stepped back and whispered, "It's perfect." Linda looked around the room, the glow bouncing off the old photos, the gentle shimmer touching the furniture. The entire space transformed into something soft and heartfelt, and for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to feel proud of what she had done, even if she was terrified of what would happen next. Then, as if the universe wanted to test her courage, the sound came again, the low hum of a familiar engine turning onto the street. Ethan froze in place, his eyes wide. "Mom," he whispered. "I think that's Dad." Linda felt her heart drop, not with fear of him, but with fear of the moment itself, the moment that could either heal or hurt, the moment she had been preparing for but still didn't feel ready to face. Footsteps approached the house, steady and slow. Each one felt like a wave hitting the shore, carrying change with it. Linda held Ethan's hand for a quick moment, gripping it tightly before letting go. "Whatever happens," she whispered. "Thank you for helping me." Ethan nodded, his expression soft and strong at the same time. The front door handle shifted gently, turning as the door clicked open. Time seemed to slow, and the air felt heavier. The living room lights flickered softly against the walls, illuminating the memories they had placed with so much hope. Mark Bennett stepped into the house, unaware of what waited for him just a few feet away, unaware of the storm of emotions that filled the room, unaware that his next words could change everything. Linda stood still, Ethan beside her. The moment had arrived, and there was no turning back. The story of their family was about to move into a new chapter, but none of them knew whether it would begin with healing or heartbreak. Not yet, not until Mark looked up and saw everything they had created for him, and everything they hoped he would feel again. When Mark stepped into the house that evening, the soft glow of the lights hit him first, then the wall of photos, then the handwritten notes that carried pieces of the life he had slowly drifted away from. And for a long second he stood frozen in the doorway, holding his jacket in one hand while the quiet weight of the room settled on his shoulders like a memory he had forgotten how to hold. Linda stood a few steps ahead of him, her hands clasped tightly together, her heart shaking as she watched his face shift from confusion to surprise to something gentler, something she had not seen in him for far too long. Ethan kept close to her, not saying a word, knowing this moment belonged to his parents, not to him. Mark slowly walked inside, his eyes moving across the photos of their early days together, the road trips, the first apartment, the birthdays they celebrated when life felt simpler, and his breath came out uneven. "I didn't know you remembered all of this," he said quietly, his voice rough around the edges. Linda swallowed, trying to keep her words steady. "I never forgot," she said. "I just thought maybe you did." The honesty in her voice hit him harder than the lights or the pictures or the surprise itself. He looked around again, taking in the effort, the meaning, the love woven into every small detail, and for a moment he seemed unsure where to stand or what to feel. Ethan stepped back slowly, giving them space, moving closer to the staircase but staying close enough to hear. Mark rubbed the back of his neck, something he always did when he was overwhelmed. "Linda," he whispered, "I didn't realize things had gotten this far." She blinked, trying to steady her breathing. "I tried to talk to you," she said softly, "but we kept getting busy. You came home tired. I didn't want to push, and then the distance just kept growing." Mark looked down at the floor, shame pressing heavily on his chest, because he knew she was telling the truth. He knew he had let the quiet between them turn into something colder, heavier, something that sometimes felt easier to ignore than face. "I never meant to hurt you," he said, and his voice cracked just slightly, enough to make Linda's heart tremble. "I know," she whispered, "but meaning well isn't the same as being here." Ethan watched his parents carefully, hoping for a sign that this moment would pull them toward each other instead of pushing them further apart. Mark moved slowly toward the table covered in small notes, picking one up and reading it silently. It was written in Linda's handwriting, a memory from years ago about the night they danced in the kitchen after Ethan fell asleep. A night filled with laughter and light rain tapping on the windows. He held the note for a long time, almost afraid to set it down. When he finally looked at Linda, his eyes were softer. "Why did you do all this?" he asked, not angrily but with a raw curiosity. "Because I wanted you to remember us," she answered, her voice trembling with vulnerability. "Not the chores, not the long days, not the arguments, just us." Mark nodded slowly, letting the truth sink deeper. He took a step closer, and then another, until they were standing only a foot apart. Close enough to feel the warmth but still separated by the weight of all the unspoken things between them. Before he could say anything else, before Linda could figure out how to take the next step, the unexpected voice cut through the moment from outside, sharp and too familiar. "Mark, are you home? We need to talk." Linda's breath caught instantly, the hope she had felt only seconds ago slipping like sand between her fingers. Ethan straightened, his expression tightening. Mark froze, the softness on his face replaced by a stunned stillness. Linda recognized the voice at once, because Mark's co-worker Rebecca had been calling the house more often lately, too often, always about work, always with timing that made Linda wonder if work was the whole truth. Ethan glanced at his father, watching his reaction, watching for signs that would tell him how worried he should be. Mark closed his eyes for a moment, letting out a long breath filled with frustration. Not guilt but exhaustion. "She shouldn't be here," he whispered under his breath. "Not right now." Linda felt her chest tense, but she forced herself to stay calm. She didn't want to jump to conclusions, not when things were already fragile. Ethan stepped forward protectively. "Dad," he said carefully, "is everything okay?" Mark held up a hand gently, shaking his head, trying to gather himself before facing the situation that had just walked straight to his front door. Another knock came, firmer this time, and the voice followed again. "Mark, it's important." The tension inside the house stretched tightly, almost sharp. Linda felt a swirl of fear and disappointment rising, not because she thought Mark had betrayed her, but because she feared this moment, this scene, this intrusion would break the fragile beginning of healing they had just found. Mark looked at Linda, not with guilt but with urgency. "Please," he said quietly, "don't think the worst. Let me handle this." Linda nodded slowly, even though her heart felt unsteady. Mark walked toward the front door, but Linda and Ethan stayed where they were, watching, listening, hoping the outside voice wouldn't become a storm inside their home. When Mark opened the door just a few inches, Linda could see Rebecca standing on the porch, holding a thick folder and looking stressed, not flirtatious, not overly familiar, just stressed. "Mark, I'm sorry to show up like this," she said quickly, "but the project files got mixed up and the meeting was moved up. I didn't know where else to go and you weren't answering your phone." Mark exhaled slowly. "Rebecca, you can't just come to my house without calling first." His tone wasn't warm, and it wasn't apologetic, it was firm, the tone of someone setting a boundary. Rebecca blinked, startled. "I'm sorry," she said. "I really didn't mean to cause trouble." Mark glanced back over his shoulder at the glowing living room, at Linda standing quietly, at Ethan watching with protective eyes, and he realized how close he had come to letting work swallow his life completely. "We'll handle this tomorrow," he said gently but firmly. "Tonight I'm with my family." Rebecca nodded, apologized again, and left the porch quickly, her footsteps fading into the cold evening air. Mark closed the door and turned around slowly, his heart pounding, his mind racing. Linda looked at him, not angry, just tired of feeling like second place to everything else in his life. He walked toward her, stopping close enough that she could see the sincerity in his eyes. "Linda," he whispered, "I'm sorry for letting work take over. I'm sorry for not being here. I'm sorry for forgetting how important we are." Ethan stepped back again, giving them space, letting them have the moment without interference. Linda exhaled shakily. "I don't need perfect," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just need us to try." Mark reached for her hand slowly, carefully, the way someone reaches for something fragile but precious. "I want to try," he said. "I want us back, all of us." Linda felt a small warmth rise inside her chest, not fireworks, not dramatic, just gentle and real. Ethan watched his parents take a step toward each other. Finally, after months of distance, the lights in the room flickered softly, glowing against the pictures of their younger years, reminding them of everything worth holding on to. For the first time in a long time, the Bennett house felt like a home again. Not perfect, not fixed overnight, but beginning, healing, and honest, a new chapter. One they would write together, starting right there in the warm golden light of their living room. with hope slowly returning to the center of their family, where it always belonged.